I never imagined I would be standing in my own family's conference room, surrounded by strangers holding contracts worth $8 million, while my daughter-in-law smiled as if she had already won. She believed she was minutes away from selling our family estate, the land my great-grandfather built from nothing. She had convinced my son to put it into an LLC, claiming it was just for tax purposes. What she didn't know was that 2 days earlier, I had recorded every word of her meeting with the foreign buyers, where she promised to take the money, leave my family behind, and disappear overseas. When I pressed play in front of everyone, the room went silent. The money men leaned back in their chairs. My son's face turned white, and in that moment, Sabrina's perfect smile shattered. This was no longer a business deal. It was the moment her lies ended, and the truth took its place. My name is Victoria Hale. I am 62 years old, and for 5 generations, my family estate has stood as a symbol of sacrifice, perseverance, and legacy. My great-grandfather worked through the Great Depression to protect this land. My parents married on the front lawn. I raised my son here, and I held my husband's hand in the same study where he took his last breath. This estate is not just property, it is memory, heritage, and identity. Every hallway holds a story. Every tree was planted with purpose. After my husband passed away, my son Michael became my source of strength. He was hardworking, intelligent, and deeply loyal, or at least I believed so. When he married Sabrina 3 years ago, I welcomed her into our family with open arms. She was polite, elegantly dressed, always speaking about investments and global opportunities. She seemed like a woman who had everything under control. At first, I was relieved. I thought Michael had found a partner who would help him grow, maybe even help him lead our family legacy into the next chapter. But things changed after Sabrina started suggesting financial restructuring. She said wealthy families were creating LLCs to reduce taxes and protect estates from lawsuits. She presented it as a strategic move to safeguard the property. She would pat my hand gently and say, "Victoria, this is how modern families protect assets. You work too hard to risk losing any value." She always used words like we, family, and protection. But I started noticing something strange. Every time she spoke of the estate, she never talked about preserving it. She talked about monetizing it. One evening, over dinner, she said, "We could triple the cash flow by liquidating sections of the land. Why let it sit when it could earn millions?" Michael nodded thoughtfully, but I shook my head. This land doesn't exist to make money. It exists to hold our history. Her smile tightened at the edges, but she stayed silent. That was the first signal, a quiet warning that her vision wasn't aligned with ours. Month later, Sabrina brought documents to the house. They were the LLC transfer papers. She claimed everything would remain the same. It was just legally structured differently. Michael reassured me it was temporary. Sabrina said, "Nothing changes, Victoria. You'll still live here. We're just making it more secure for the future." Her tone was soothing, but her eyes were calculating. I hesitated, but I signed, believing my son would never allow anything that would put our legacy at risk. For a little while, life seemed normal. Sabrina hosted charity events at the estate and posted videos online showcasing the architecture and gardens. But she never talked about family history. She talked about market value, foreign interest, asset appreciation. I noticed she was always on the phone, speaking softly, stepping out of rooms when I entered. One morning, I was in the study when a notification popped up on the computer, an automated email from a real estate investment firm. It wasn't addressed to me directly, but it contained an offer with our property listed at full selling value. Not rental, not partnership, full purchase with immediate transfer. At first, my hands trembled. Then I stood completely still. Sabrina hadn't restructured the estate to protect it. She had restructured it to sell it. When I confronted Michael, he looked confused. He said Sabrina told him it was a routine consultation, but my instincts told me the truth. This wasn't consultation. It was preparation. That night, I sat in the master bedroom, the same room my husband and I had shared for 40 years. The estate was quiet, but inside me, something shifted. For the first time, I saw Sabrina clearly, not as my daughter-in-law, not as my son's wife, but as someone who had targeted my family, planned patiently, and was now dangerously close to succeeding. I knew then, if I did not act, everything my family built would be wiped away by a woman who spoke about loyalty, but dreamed only of money. And that was the moment the real story began. This story is not just about land. It is about protecting your legacy. If you believe families should not be taken advantage of in the name of greed, subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of heaviness in my chest, like the house itself was trying to warn me. Everything looked the same on the outside. The manicured gardens, the quiet hallways, the sun hitting the windows. But nothing felt the same. The estate had always felt alive, like a member of the family. Now it felt watched, counted, priced. My suspicions were confirmed when I overheard a conversation between Sabrina and an unknown man on the terrace. Her tone was low, but her words were crystal clear. Yes, the land alone appraises at $6 million. The mineral rights and patents bring it up to $8 million. Once the LLC transfer is finalized, it's as good as sold. My husband thinks it's for tax sheltering, but he doesn't understand the global market. I do. She laughed softly, a confident laugh, a laugh that didn't belong to a woman protecting a family home. It belonged to someone closing a deal. I stepped back quietly, my heart pounding, my breath steady. I had been suspicious before. Now I was certain. Sabrina was orchestrating something far beyond a harmless financial move. She wasn't securing the estate. She was positioning it for liquidation. Later that afternoon, fate confirmed everything. An email notification appeared on the estate's shared office computer. It was addressed to Primary Manager, Hale Legacy LLC. The body of the email read, "Inspection scheduled for Thursday with international buyers. Please prepare full deed review and mineral rights documents. Travel logistics for offshore transfer arranged." My hands trembled as I read it. Offshore transfer. Offshore. She wasn't planning a partial sale or a partnership. She was planning an exit. I immediately printed the email and drove to see my sister Eleanor. She had been an attorney for 30 years before retiring. When I placed the email in front of her, she studied it silently, her jaw tightening. "This is pre-sale documentation," she finally said. "She's already in negotiations." I shook my head in disbelief. "But she doesn't own the estate. Technically, I do." Eleanor placed a firm hand on mine. "No, not anymore. You signed the LLC transfer. This means you split ownership with Michael and, by marriage, Sabrina. She has legal leverage. If she gets your son to co-sign, she can force the sale." My stomach dropped. I hadn't just been tricked emotionally. I had been legally cornered. Eleanor continued, "Victoria, if she completes this sale, you could lose everything. And because it's in an LLC, she could take the profits and transfer them offshore. You wouldn't even be able to trace where the money went." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The thought of my husband's portrait being removed from the dining room, the thought of strangers walking through my great-grandparents' garden, not understanding any of its meaning, the thought of Sabrina smiling as she boarded a private jet with money earned by destroying my family legacy. It made my blood run cold. I drove home in silence, but my mind was racing. When I arrived, I found Sabrina and Michael in the kitchen. Sabrina was typing on her laptop, while Michael was looking over spreadsheets. She looked up at me, her expression warm and rehearsed. "Victoria, we have great news. A group is interested in investing in the estate's development potential. We're not selling anything right now, just exploring options." I forced a calm smile. "May I see the documents?" She hesitated, then closed her laptop. "It's all preliminary. No need to get overwhelmed with details." Michael added gently, "Mom, Sabrina knows what she's doing. You don't need to stress." That was when I knew I had to be careful. If I reacted emotionally, I would lose ground. Sabrina was counting on me to panic, to sound unreasonable, to make Michael see me as the problem. So I nodded slowly. "You're right. I shouldn't worry. I trust my family." But inside, I made a silent promise to myself. This would be the last day Sabrina would ever believe I was in the dark. That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, I went into the estate's old security room. The system my husband installed years ago included audio monitoring in common areas for safety reasons. I activated the system and set it to record all meetings taking place in the study, the library, and the conference room, places where Sabrina often conducted her business calls. 2 days later, everything changed. Sabrina held a private meeting in the study with a group of foreign investors. I listened from the security room as she said, "Once the transaction clears, we move immediately. Michael will stay behind and sign whatever is necessary. His mother has no idea she's about to lose everything." In that moment, the conflict was no longer silent. It was real, and now it had a voice. Her voice. Recorded, preserved. She thought she was playing a game of money, but she had forgotten one thing. This estate was my family's heartbeat, and I was done letting her pretend she controlled it. The moment I heard Sabrina's voice on that recording, calm, confident, and completely certain of my ignorance, something inside me shifted. I was not just a woman fighting for property. I was a mother defending her bloodline, a widow guarding the legacy she had promised to protect with her last breath. Sabrina believed she was untouchable because she had manipulated legal language, charmed my son, and disguised greed as intelligence. But what she failed to understand was that a house can be purchased, but a legacy must be earned, and she had never been part of ours. The next morning, I called my sister Eleanor. We sat in the library, the morning sunlight streaming in through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the antique rug. I played the recording for her. As Sabrina's voice filled the room, cool and unapologetic, Eleanor's expression hardened. "She's laid out her entire motive," Eleanor said. "Greed, intent, deception. We don't just have evidence, we have proof of premeditated fraud. And if we move correctly, this won't just stop her. We can permanently strip her legal access to the estate." I looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking anymore. They were steady, ready. "So what do we do?" I asked. Eleanor leaned forward. "We let her finish her plan. We let her believe she's winning. And then, when she tries to sign the final sale documents, we present the recording in front of the buyers and Michael. This must be done publicly, legally, and undeniably." It was a daring plan. Risky, yes, but it was the only way to reveal Sabrina's true intentions without giving her the chance to twist the narrative. So I agreed. I would act like the unsuspecting, naive mother-in-law she believed I was. For the next few days, I played my part. When Sabrina walked through the halls with real estate documents, I smiled politely and asked if she needed anything. When she hosted potential buyers for private estate tours, I offered refreshments. She believed she was orchestrating a sophisticated financial maneuver, while I was setting the stage for her downfall. One evening, while Sabrina was away at a strategic dinner in the city, I found Michael in the living room, reviewing spreadsheets. He looked exhausted, worn down by numbers and projections. I sat beside him and gently placed my hand on his arm. "Michael," I said softly, "do you truly understand what this sale means? Do you understand that once this is gone, it can never be brought back?" He sighed. "Mom, it won't be gone. The money will be tied into new investments. Sabrina says it's smart business. She says the estate is an emotional burden for you, and that selling it is an act of love." I felt a deep ache in my chest at his words. My son, whose first steps were taken on these floors, who learned to ride his bike in the driveway, who picked apples with his father every fall, was calling the estate my burden, not realizing it. He was repeating Sabrina's manipulation, word for word. Instead of arguing, I looked him in the eye and said, "Son, love does not destroy. It protects. When you were a child, this estate raised you. When your father died, this estate held you. If someone convinces you to erase your past for financial gain, they are not building your future. They are stealing it." A silence fell between us. Michael looked away, conflicted, but I could see something in his eyes, a flicker of doubt, a crack in the wall Sabrina had built around his judgment. The next day, Sabrina returned with her final announcement. "The international buyers are coming Thursday. We're signing the transfer. Once the deal closes, Michael and I will be relocating for global expansion opportunities." Relocating, not traveling, not investing, leaving. And Michael looked surprised. "Relocating where?" Sabrina smiled. Switzerland first, then Monaco. The LLC will be dissolved after payout. Your mother will receive her portion, and we'll move on with our lives. My portion, as if the life I had built was nothing more than a percentage on a ledger. I took a deep breath and said, then let us do it properly. If this is the end of an era, the entire family should be present. We should sit together in the conference room for the final signatures. Sabrina's eyes lit up with victory. She believed I was ready to surrender, but what she didn't know was that the conference room she would walk into that Thursday was not the final step of her plan. It was the beginning of her unraveling. Thursday arrived with a sky so clear it felt almost symbolic, like even the weather was preparing to witness truth. As the foreign investors' black SUVs rolled up the driveway, I stood at the top of the estate steps, calm and composed. Inside, the house was already prepared. The long oak conference table in the estate's formal meeting room was polished. Leather chairs were arranged. Documents were placed neatly in stacks. But the most important item in the room wasn't on the table. It was the small voice recorder that my sister Eleanor held in her purse, ready to be revealed at the exact right moment. Sabrina walked in wearing a white suit, confident, radiant with the energy of someone convinced they were minutes away from securing millions. She greeted the investors warmly, speaking to them in the polished language of international finance. She didn't look at me when she spoke, as if I were now irrelevant, a formality, a relic of the past. Michael stood beside her, visibly nervous. It was clear now that he was in too deep. He wasn't just confused, he was trapped in her narrative, and Sabrina was counting on that. Once everyone was seated, Sabrina gestured toward the head of the table, where a thick set of documents waited. This, she said proudly, is the final transfer agreement. Once my husband and I sign as managing members of the LLC, and once Mrs. Hale gives formal acknowledgement as senior advisor, the estate will be officially transferred to your investment group. I remained silent. I could feel the weight of every generation before me. My great-grandfather clearing this land by hand, my father planting the first vineyard, my mother teaching me at the kitchen table, and then my husband, sitting in this very room, telling me before he passed, Victoria, never let anyone take what our family bled to build. His voice became my strength. One of the investors turned to me and asked politely, Mrs. Hale, are you in full agreement with this transfer? Sabrina quickly interjected before I could answer. Of course she is. We have already discussed everything extensively as a family. That was when I finally stood. My chair made a deliberate sound as it slid back, a sound that drew every eye in the room. No, I said firmly. We have not. Sabrina's head turned sharply. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes flickered. Just for a second. I walked slowly around the table, calm, measured, purposeful. I would like to share something before any signatures are made, I said. Because once this document is signed, not only will our family estate be gone forever, but it will be sold under false pretenses. The lead investor looked confused. False pretenses? Sabrina forced a laugh. Victoria is just emotionally attached. Please, let's not derail this with sentimental... Eleanor stood and placed the small recording device on the table. This is not sentiment, she said. This is evidence. The room fell silent. I pressed play. Sabrina's voice filled the room, clear and undeniable. It doesn't matter what Victoria thinks. Once the deal goes through, we liquidate and disappear. Michael won't know until we're already out of the country. Her attachment is pathetic, but it will be over soon. 8 million wired overseas, tax-free. That estate means nothing to me. Michael's eyes widened. His whole body turned toward Sabrina in shock. But the recording continued. This family thinks legacy matters. Legacy doesn't pay for yachts. Legacy doesn't buy a life in Monaco. Once I'm gone, they can cry over their memories while I enjoy my money. Gasps rippled through the room. The investors looked horrified, realizing they were being lured into a fraudulent scheme. Michael stood slowly, every muscle stiff, his face drained of color. Sabrina, he said, voice trembling, You plan to leave me? Sabrina's confident face cracked. Michael, that recording is out of context. I was angry that day. Victoria manipulated. Eleanor cut in sternly. This recording was taken the day after the inspection agreement was signed. You were speaking to these investors' representatives. The lead investor turned cold. We will not be involved in criminal conspiracy. Sabrina suddenly dropped the act. She slammed her hand on the table. You all act like you're so righteous. This estate is worth more as cash. Why should we cling to dirt and memories when we can have real money? Michael backed away from her, disbelief in his eyes. Because this land is not dirt. It is our identity, our history. My father's dying wish was to protect it. Sabrina looked around the room, desperate now. You people don't understand. This was business. I stepped forward then, my voice steady. No, Sabrina, this was greed, and today is the day it ends. Eleanor presented legal documents showing Sabrina's breach of fiduciary duty, fraudulent intent, and recorded evidence. A court injunction was already filed. Sabrina was frozen out of the LLC. She no longer had any control, any access, or any rights. The investors stood and walked out. Michael looked at Sabrina one last time and said quietly, You didn't just try to sell our estate. You tried to sell my bloodline, and for that, I will never forgive you. As security escorted Sabrina out, the house felt alive again, like it had been holding its breath, waiting for truth to be spoken. In that moment, I did not feel victorious. I felt restored. The legacy had been defended. My voice had been heard, and the estate, our home, belonged to the family again. When Sabrina was escorted off the property, there was no dramatic protest, no tearful apology, no sign of remorse. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She asked for her lawyer. Even in that moment, she clung to the illusion of control. But the truth was undeniable now. Her power had never come from love or loyalty. It came from secrecy, manipulation, and the belief that kindness could be turned into weakness. And once the truth stood in the open, her power dissolved. The estate, the heartbeat of our family, had survived her attempt to dismantle it. The hours following the confrontation were quiet. The investors left in silence, their polished black vehicles rolling down the long driveway. The sun began to set over the fields, painting the sky in soft gold. It felt like the house itself was exhaling after months of suffocating deceit. I walked through the great hall, my fingers running along the wood panels my father had refinished by hand. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was peace. Michael sat alone in the study, staring into the fireplace. He looked like a boy again, not the polished businessman Sabrina had molded, but the son I had raised, thoughtful and deeply human. When I entered the room, he stood and his voice broke. Mom, he said, I didn't protect you. I didn't protect our legacy. I let her convince me that money meant safety. I reached for his hands and held them. You don't owe me an apology. You were manipulated by someone who knew how to twist trust into control. What matters is that you saw the truth, and you chose to stand on the right side of it. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I want to be the son Dad raised me to be. I want to protect this land, our name, our history. Hearing those words didn't just heal a wound, it restored a bond. Sabrina had tried to fracture our family from within, but what she broke only revealed how strong our foundation truly was. A family tied together by legacy isn't weakened by betrayal. It is strengthened by the fight to preserve it. Over the next few weeks, legal proceedings confirmed everything in our favor. Sabrina was charged with attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit real estate theft, and intentional misrepresentation. The LLC was dissolved, and the estate was transferred back into my sole ownership. Eleanor worked alongside Michael to create a new trust, not built on deception, but on clear, transparent legacy planning. This time, every clause was written with intention. The estate would never again be vulnerable to manipulation. But justice didn't end in court documents. Justice came in the quiet moments, the laughter returning to the dining room, the team of gardeners whistling as they trimmed hedges, the scent of freshly baked bread filling the kitchen. Life had returned. Legacy had prevailed. One morning, I found myself walking the same path my husband and I had walked every evening before he passed. The grass sparkled with dew. The trees swayed in a gentle breeze. I stopped at the old stone bench overlooking the valley and sat down. The land stretched out in front of me like a living memory, alive with history, quiet with dignity. I closed my eyes and whispered, "We protected it," just like you asked, in my heart. I knew this story wasn't about revenge. It was about awakening. The world often tells us that tradition is outdated, that legacy is secondary to profit. But legacy is not about money. It is about meaning. It is about the blood, sweat, dreams, and prayers that built our lives. And when someone tries to erase that for personal gain, they are not taking land. They are stealing identity. Michael walked up behind me and gently placed his hand on my shoulder. "We'll keep it alive, Mom," he said, "for your grandchildren and their children." And in that moment, I knew this wasn't the end of a battle. It was the beginning of a new era, not built by greed but by gratitude, not fueled by control but by connection, not led by an outsider's ambition but by a family's purpose. My story is not a warning. It is a lesson, a reminder to every person watching. Your legacy is worth protecting. Your voice matters. And no one can take your history away unless you hand it to them. If you believe family inheritance and legacy should be protected, not exploited, make sure you subscribe to my channel and comment where you're watching from. Your voice matters, and your story deserves to be heard.